Welcome to Direction Northeast. Hello, I'm Amanda Broome. This program is a presentation of Mass Communications Department of Northeast State Community College. In spite of the lyrics of a well-known children's verse, words can have as much power as sticks and stones. Our guest on this episode of Direction Northeast goes from hip-hop to rhyming with meter and verse. He's a spoken word poet and the primary author of Sacrificial Poets Youth Inc. curriculum, and founder of Poetic Justice, an after-school program focused on spoken words and hip-hop. We'll start our conversation in just a moment. So thank you.
Business, medical, and financial institutions must have confidence in the data that they use. Information assurance is the strategic use of technology and software to protect data from internal and external threats. Northeast State offers an associate's degree program designed to fill the demand for information assurance professionals. The Information Assurance program offers hands-on personal instruction. Northeast State Community College is an accredited institution offering financial aid and job placement. Northeast State, we're here to get you there.
Our guest for this episode of Direction Northeast is a spoken word poet and artistic director of Sacrificial Poets Youth Inc., a nationally competing youth poetry organization that works with local, middle, and high school students. Welcome, Kane Smego, to Direction Northeast. Hi. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I grew up in Durham, North Carolina, in the Durham, Chapel Hill, Raleigh area. And I'm a spoken word artist, which basically means that I do a type of poetry that is kind of classified as performance poetry. So everything you normally think of in a poem, looking at figurative language and the techniques of poetic writing, but also with another layer of it being performed. So it's kind of roots in theater and in the literary arts world as well.
So when you were younger, do you think you would have, when someone asked you, what are you going to be when you grow up, do you think you would have said a spoken word artist?
I was always really into hip hop. Growing up, I used to write rhymes and was in a couple different groups. But I always felt a draw to doing something that really gave back to the community. And it wasn't until my junior year in college that I really realized that I could mesh the two, that I could take my art and my passion, my hobby, and also use it to give back and to help the community in the ways that I wanted to. So no, growing up, it was always something I did. It was always a passion of mine. It was something I wanted to do for the rest of my life, but I never thought of it as being a career. And I think a lot of that, has to do with folks saying that there's no money in art and, that kind of common lesson that they always teach you coming up. And for many years, I believed that.
So what message would you give to younger audience who are growing up with people telling them that there is no future in that they shouldn't pursue art?
I mean, I think it goes beyond art, but just their passions in general. But I think that there's, I guess the kind of rule that I usually follow is if you do something well and you love to do it to the point where you're willing to risk everything for it or to give all of your energy and time for it, then you can make it work. And there's folks who do things really well and aren't able to put that much effort in. And there's also folks who are really interested in something, but maybe they don't do it that well. So I think it's really finding a combination of if something is your passion and you also do it very well, I think you'll find a way to make it work. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be making millions, but I think you can find a way to make a living doing it.
You mentioned sacrifice. What did you have to give in order to be where you are now?
Oh, that's a hard question. A lot of time and energy. I mean, in terms of going to school, the kind of institutional education aspect of it, I put in a lot of work. I was working multiple jobs. I got a scholarship after being out of school for 2 years and working in factories and doing everything I could to just get by. I got a scholarship with a full ride to UNC and was still working a couple jobs while I was there just to make enough money to pay bills and things like that. And then in terms of my art, just putting in the time, writing all the time, performing, watching other people, being mentored by people that had more experience than I did. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of sacrifice, but I think the most is just those nights when I didn't want to write, when I wanted to just go to sleep, or the nights when I didn't want to study and I wanted to go to sleep, really, sitting down and making myself dedicate to my craft.
How did you manage to keep your hobby and to maintain it as your passion, even though you were so busy?
Well, my freshman year of college, I actually didn't. I first got into spoken word and poetry slam, which is poetry competition, when I was 19. I was just out of high school that first year when I was just working, and I got selected to a team that went to Brave New Voices, which is the International Youth Poetry Slam Festival. It was in New York City that year, and it was really life-changing. I got to share space and share stories with 50 teams of youth from all over the nation and some from abroad. And in 2007, I started school, and I was working 3 jobs, and there was no time. So I didn't actually compete or go to slams that next year. I did a little writing on the side, but nothing really big. And then it wasn't until 2008 that I really found my way back into it and learned to manage my time and knew that it was something I wanted to make my job. And that's when I started slamming on the adult scene and competing at the National Poetry Slam and really trying to make it something I was dedicated to do full time.
You mentioned poetry competitions. Tell me how that works. How do you compete in
Poetry Slam is an interesting phenomenon. Poetry Slam was created originally as a barroom game to get people to come out and watch art by a construction worker who was also an incredible writer named Mark Smith from Chicago, at Chicago's Green Mill. And this was in the 1980s. And the way it works is there's 5 random judges that are selected from the audience. And each judge gets a whiteboard and a marker, and they give the poet, each poet gets 3 minutes with a 10-second grace period to do their piece with no musical accompaniment, no props, all original work. And each judge gives them a score from 0 to 10 to 1 decimal point, 7.3, 9.5, 4.2. And they drop the high score and the low score, and they get a score in the middle out of 30. And that's the way a Poetry Slam works. So when we go to regional competition, even when we go to the National Poetry Slam, in the preliminary bouts, in the semifinals bouts, and in the finals, it's all randomly selected judges. So sometimes you'll get professors of poetry or writing or history. Sometimes you'll get someone who never heard of spoken word poetry or never considered themselves a poet coming in off the street. So you really have to, your art has to be accessible, and your art has to be able to transcend, differences and be universally understood and felt. And so I think that's the beauty of it, is that there's no telling on any given night. Folks who put in the work and are the strongest poets generally tend to win or do well, but on any given night, things can shift and things can happen. So that's what kind of makes it exciting.
You mentioned exciting. Tell us your feelings about being at a poetry competition.
I mean, it's awesome. On a deeper level, it's amazing to be able to hear people's stories, their life experiences, their ideas, their passions. No matter what race, class, gender, sexual orientation, whatever they're from, you connect on just being human. And then, of course, the artistic side of it, incredible writing, incredible performance. So it's energizing being around people that are able to be so open and honest and vulnerable, but it's also energizing to be on stage and, 2010 when I was on final stage at the National Poetry Slam and 3,000 people in the audience and the lights, and getting to just give a piece of yourself, your art, your craft, your soul, your story to a crowd of people who are hanging on your every word is something really important. It makes you feel heard, it makes you feel understood, and that your story has value. So it's incredibly powerful.
Would you be willing to give us a piece of yourself today and
Sure.
Give us an example?
Definitely. I'm trying to think which poem I should do. There's a poem that I wrote a few years back, actually some years back, that was about, one of the first spoken word poems I wrote that was about my experience growing up in a single mother household. It's called X Chromosome. I think that would probably be a good one to share.
Absolutely.
So usually I'm standing, so this will have to be the laid back version. I swear allegiance to my X chromosome, the one my mother gave me, the one that pushed mops for 17 years so we could eat. I swear allegiance to my X chromosome because Mama was my guardian, Papa was a Rolling Stone, Papa was a doctor. Precisely penning patient prescription dosages down to the milligram, but always seem to come up short on our monthly child support checks. And so our mothers try to write inspirational songs of life to deadbeats, so their children have no support. But I cling to the hope that it's gonna get better, though feeling under the weather. I wonder whether wonderful pleasures will ever come her direction. Must my mother struggle forever? There's no light, she's stuck in the cellar. It seems like in this life, everyone is against her. Depression is present, man, because the pressure is stress, and every day is a setup. Another vendetta, a letter from my father meant to ruffle her feathers, attempt to plunder and shred up her credit like federal debts, but she won't let up or respond to those letters, and so I have sworn allegiance to my X chromosome. You see, at the time of my coming into this world, my mother went through labor twice. My mother's eyes, my mother's pupils dilated 10 centimeters, her gaze giving birth to a love for me that will never die. And though I carry the color of Mars in my blood, it is Venus that remains closer to the sun. Closer to her son, but now Venus is on the run in a world where 99% of all the murder, rape, violence, and war has been caused by males. And we still say it's a man's world, like that's been working for us. When male plus violence is equal malevolence, we say it's a man's world where all human, the opposite sex are females or women who have menstrual cycles until menopause. I want my men to pause, think twice. The next time you see something you like and feel the need to be like, shawty, you looking nice. I could call you wife, think twice. And imagine your mother's face on her shoulders. Because every woman is somebody's daughter. What do you want for your daughters? Most women be somebody's mother, grandmother. I stand, hover over history and wonder how we pray to our father but sin against our mother, earth, mother, nature, motherland. I want to rubber band my arm so tight, isolate the vein, and bring the needle so close that I can probe the bone, extract the testosterone, and overdose on estrogen until it's overflowing so I can strengthen my feminine side. And we hear the word feminist, right? And we think of new age as if feminism were a novelty, but feminism was conceived on the eve that Eve split from an oppressive Adam. Eve split from Adam. Eve split in Adam. And the energy released was empowerment. A new vision through nuclear fission, and the nuclear family saw its first revision, changed our trajectory, altered our arc, the arc that Joan built, the matriarch, the archangel, the leader, forget Bonaparte, it was Joan of Arc. You see, from the start, women looked to the stars, stargazing, sojourning for truth, and it was found, sometimes written in the dirt with callous fingers, sometimes parked in a bus seat where Rosa proved that even by sitting down, women could take a stand, sometimes through suffering or suffrage. And I like to think that true female MCs have learned from Harriet Tubman so they keep their tracks underground, making music and poetry to bring the people to the promised land. And I find truth, I find power in my mama's hands, pushing a broom for 17 years, and though I'm grown and consider myself a man on my own, I raise my hands and swear allegiance to my X chromosome. It's that piece.
Wow, wow. Can you tell us a little bit about how you wrote that, how you put your soul on paper like that?
My writing process is kind of interesting. It's changed over the years. I mean, being a hip-hop artist, a lot of times I would just sit down and just start rhyming and start writing. And as I've gotten more into it, the better you get, the harder you are on yourself. So the better you get, the longer it takes you to write a piece. I wrote that about 5 years ago, so I did some of it in one sitting, but usually my writing process is I have an idea, and then I'll just start jotting down lines. It could be a section, it could be a line, a stanza, and sometimes it'll take a week, sometimes it'll take a month, sometimes it'll take a year before I have enough fragments that I write about when I'm out in my day and I see an image or I think of a line. And then once I have enough, I feel like for a poem, then I sit down and kind of jigsaw it together and tweak it, and then I revise it. But yeah, my process is kind of all over the place. It's like you got to have inspiration before the art can really come.
So how long have you been doing that?
I mean, I've been writing rhymes since I was in 3rd or 4th grade. I didn't start doing spoken word until I was 19. I had an old English teacher who was my English teacher in 10th grade, and he was the one that kind of started the spoken word movement for youth in the area. And back when I was a youth, he just took a team of like 5 kids that were interested to Brave New Voices, the international slam. And I went in '06 and it changed my life. And so I came back, and that's when I had aged out from the youth scene. And so some friends of mine and I started organizing youth, and now we have a nonprofit that we run, and we run monthly events, and we teach 7 days a week programs. So yeah, it's been about 8 years that I've been involved now with spoken word.
Tell us a little bit about your nonprofit. What exactly do you do?
So Sacrificial Poets started out as a group of young folks, mostly young men, who went to Brave New Voices on that team in 2006. And we started by having an open mic where we would try to get other kids to come out and tell their stories. And we were kind of doing poems to ourselves at first, right? There was like 4 or 5 people in the audience. every once in a while a high school teacher would give extra credit for their class to come out. And now we have a monthly open mic and a monthly youth poetry slam, and we usually have between 100 and 200 people every month. And we also run programs all the time. So we go into schools, into English classrooms, speech classrooms, history classrooms, creative writing classrooms, and we teach writing and performance, but also our curriculum is really focused on explorations of identity, who you are, what are your life experiences, what is it that you know, and how can you use those things, and also some of the tools of poetry that we teach, metaphor, simile, personification, how can you use those to create a really powerful narrative of your story. So that's what my job as artistic director is to create that curriculum, to organize and plan those programs, and then to carry them out. And then we also take a youth team to the competition every summer. So that's probably the most fun part of the job.
Tell us a little bit about taking the youth team to competitions. What does that feel like? What is that?
It's awesome. I mean, you get to see them throughout the year. You know, the way that we make the team now is that every month, 10 youth slam for 8 months. They compete. And at the end of the year, actually tomorrow is our Grand Slam finals, is the top 12 youth poets from the entire year compete for 6 spots on the team that we then take. It's in a different U.S. city every year, so this year it'll be in Chicago at Columbia University. So it's cool because you get to see them perform throughout the year, 10 kids every month, and then you see that top 12, and then you see that top 6, and then once they make the team, we spend the next 2 to 3 months over the summer having practices and trainings 2 to 3 days a week where they work on poems, they edit poems, they work on creating collaborative pieces with each other, and you get to know them. They become family. All of them, I call them little bro or little sis. They are my family members. And then I get to watch them go to the competition and see what happens when they come back. And just like it was for me, it's life-changing when you can imagine 500 young people between the ages of 13 and 19 at one campus for a week from all over the country, from South Central to Harlem to Worcester, Massachusetts to the Native American reservation in New Mexico, all types of people just coming together and learning about each other through their art. It's amazing.
So on your website, you've mentioned that poetry is a weapon. Can you tell us what exactly is your battle? Why do you need a weapon?
Yeah, I think that, in general, just in the world, there are so many things going on that affect us. And I think poetry is a means of nonviolent resistance to things that we believe in, right? Or things that we are against. It's a way to speak our truth, to say what we believe, to talk about our experiences in the world. And especially for young people who are often overlooked or seen as, folks who don't have anything to say or don't know anything because they're young. It's their opportunity to really say, these are the things that I'm going through. These are the things that are real for me in my life. And this is what I need you to understand about my experience. And this is what I need you to hear. So I think in that way, it's a weapon, it's a means of getting heard and producing change, but in a way that doesn't involve violence.
So recently, you did some work overseas. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in 2011, there were the protests and uprisings in Egypt and Tunisia to push out the dictators in both countries. And myself and the other director of Sacrificial Poets, Will McInerney, we were sitting back watching the TV and feeling very disconnected, as we often are. And we wanted to know what was really going on the human level. What is it like what makes 1 million people congregate in a square? Here we talk about changing things all the time, and you get a protest around an issue and there's like 100 people, 200 people. So to see 1 million, it's like, how did that happen? So we wanted to know. And so we wrote a proposal, we shopped it around, we went to universities, we went to the local National Public Radio station in North Carolina, and we raised $18,000 in 2 months, and we went over with a filmmaker and a translator, and we did an 8-week radio series that was collaborative poems that were narrative poems based on the interviews that we did with people at the protest during the week. So it was very inspirational, and it was very life-changing, to be able to be on the ground and learn about a different culture, be reflexive of ourselves to realize all the stereotypes even that we had, and just learn, by some of the techniques and the powerful tools that they used to organize around things that they were passionate about. It was really, really amazing.
Would it be possible for you to give us an example of some of the poems that you created?
You know what? I don't have memorized because we did a 2-man show. We wrote a play out of it. So it's me and somebody else, and it's been about 1.5 years since we put the last show on. So I would probably stumble through if I tried. But people can definitely check stuff out online. The project was called Poetic Portraits of a Revolution, PPR 2011 for short. So we have a website, ppr.org, and there's a video that's kind of our poetry performed, but also with clips of scenes from there, from people we interviewed, from the protests we attended.
I noticed that you also have a Twitter feed with, you've done a lot of posts about the PPR.
Yeah, especially when I was there. They always make fun of me because I'm the oldest in the organization. I'm 27, which is still young, but our organization is very much about for youth, by youth. And, you know, I really don't use Twitter too much. I use Facebook, which is already a stretch. But when I was over there, it was so necessary to know the things that were going on. A lot of the ways that we would find out when a protest was happening, right, or when a meeting was happening, or when a hunger strike was happening around a new law that was made. The way we would find out was by Twitter. And so that was kind of a tool that we used to communicate, and that people were using there to communicate and organize around these issues. So yeah, I kind of had to break out of my barriers and use Twitter for a couple months while I was there.
You mentioned that you learned kind of how to use Twitter on the job. Tell us a little bit about some of the other things that you've learned from the job that you have.
Oh, from the job I have, I mean, I've learned a lot. It's been a lot of, the amazing thing about it is that it's been a lot of learn by doing. You know, no one taught us how to make a curriculum. I mean, I had a professor that was very supportive. My senior year at UNC, I did an independent study where she kind of helped guide me in the direction of how to do a curriculum, but for the most part, it was just doing it. We didn't know how to teach workshops at first. You know, 5-6 years ago, we were just young kids that wanted to teach poetry to other youth like us. And so I started by doing and developed the curriculum, and now, I mean, this is what I teach literally 5 days a week in the schools, 2 days a week after school programs. Saturdays and Sundays we have programs. And I was on tour for 3.5 months last year and got to teach workshops all over the country in different states, at the college and high school and all the way down to elementary school level. So teaching has been one thing that I've learned, which is a constant process. I'm still learning. I'm still becoming a better teacher every day. And then all the organizational business kind of skills to run a nonprofit. I mean, my friend who's the executive director, he handles a lot of the finance and the organizational stuff, and I do more of the programming, the actual hands-on work, but still I have to know some of that stuff and what's going on, and it's been a ride. We just had our first annual gala fundraiser last Wednesday, which was huge. You know, something we used to talk about 4 or 5 years ago. One day we're gonna have a fundraiser and people are gonna pay us to do our art and to teach our art to other youth, and we'll have youth that we'll take to competitions, and now it's all kind of coming together. So I've learned a lot.
That seems like such a journey. Tell us a little bit about your feelings throughout the journey and how you've come to this place emotionally.
It's been a long journey. I mean, when I graduated high school, I was raised by my mother. I lived with my dad, moved out to the Midwest when I was 16 and lived with him for 1.5 years and had a falling out, and finished high school with my grandmother the last 6 months. And when I graduated, I didn't have enough money to go to school, so those 2 years was factory jobs, bakeries, landscaping, whatever I could do to get by. And so then when I went to school, I really wanted to go to school. You know, by the time I went, I was like, this is where I want to be. I don't want to be working a 10-hour-a-day factory shift. And so I was very dedicated and, you know, also working jobs while I was in school. But that whole journey has really taught me about my own, like, kind of levels, you know. My own comfort zone has been stretched and broken so much that it's allowed me to grow. So yeah, the journey, I wouldn't change anything. Like, it sounds like such a cliche, but it's the reason I'm here and able to do the things that I love is because I've been through all those other moments, those things that I didn't love, and know that that's not where I want to be. So.
How much do those challenges and your emotions play into writing your poetry?
A lot, definitely a lot. I mean, not just those things. I mean, a lot, like that, the poem I wrote about my mother was at a time when I was really reflecting on, you know, me and my mom is my everything, but at that point in time, it was something I felt very, very passionate about writing. So for me, writing is always therapy first and foremost. You know, a lot of stuff never touches the stage, never sees the limelight. It just lives in a stack of papers, you know, or notebooks. And so whatever's going on in my life, positive, negative, you know, my struggles, my joys, my confusions, the first thing I turn to is a pen and a pad. It's like my best friend. A pen and a pad is a way to get it out on paper, release it, let it go. And in some cases, when I really feel like I've captured how I felt and to say those words energizes me, then that becomes a piece that I perform and share with a larger audience.
So I noticed that your nickname is Novocaine. There's got to be a story there.
Yeah, so I started as a hip hop it's like your mama jokes meets art. You know what I mean? And it's kind of an ancient tradition too. If you study the history of the oral tradition and of folks like griots and jesters, they were very, very similar things that actually happened in the king's courts and in griot battles, where they would actually do poetry that would be either hyping up the leader that they were representing or trying to diss the other leader, right? So yeah, it was fun, and Novocaine was a play off of my real name is Kane. My government name, as they say, is Kane, and Novocaine became, like, I think the saying was that everyone used to say in high school, he'll put your mouth to sleep, like he'll quiet you if there's any doubt, you know. So it started out in that kind of fun high school hip hop period, and I still use it sometimes as my stage name for fun.
It's funny. Alrighty, so what do you find most useful about poetry?
I think that on a personal level, like I said, therapy, it's an outlet for people to talk about the things that they're going through. But I think it's also, on an interpersonal level, it's a tool for people to communicate and for people to share things that they're vulnerable about. And it's about the community too, because the spoken word community is very supportive and kind of grounded in this idea that everyone has a story. If you don't tell your story, somebody else will, you know, and they're going to mess it up. So you need to tell your story, and that by telling our stories, we can understand each other more than the surface level. You know, whatever those labels that we put on people, whether it's race, class, or gender, or whatever other category, you know, once you speak, once you break the silence with your own story, you get to set the record straight. You know, whenever we walk into a room, people look at us and immediately they make assumptions by how we dress, how we talk, you know, what race, what gender we are, what shoes we have on. And as soon as we speak, we get to set we get to set the record straight and kind of break down all those assumptions. So I think that poetry, spoken word poetry, is just one kind of aspect under this larger umbrella of the oral tradition, and this idea of speaking our own stories and learning about each other through our own words. You know, breaking down that dynamic of how do I find out about the person on the other side of town? Why flick on the news and I hear about what happened on the other side of town tonight, or on the other side of the ocean, you know? And that's what our work is about on the local level. And then what our work was about when we went to Egypt, Tunisia, was breaking and reaching across those lines of difference to learn about people face to face, primary source.
Wow. Well, thank you so very much for being on the show. And
my pleasure.
I've really learned a lot about poetry, and you've kind of inspired me.
Cool, I'm glad.
Well, we will be back in just a moment to wrap up Direction Northeast.
Northeast State's a wonderful place to start your career in college, and the campus is beautiful, the teachers are one-on-one.
It was an excellent decision to come to Northeast State. I've learned so much coming here.
I love the school, and everyone is friendly here. This has been the best time of my life. I have really enjoyed being here.
I think if it hadn't have been for Northeast, then I wouldn't feel as happy and as driven if I chose another school.
Step by step, Northeast State is here to get you there. Enroll now at northeaststate.edu.
That concludes the program for today. We learned about spoken word poetry and the power of rhyme from our guest, poet and artist, Kane Smego. Community is very important to the students of Northeast State Community College, and this program takes a look at a few of the subjects they find important. Until we meet next time, on behalf of the students, staff, and faculty of Northeast State Community College, I'm Amanda Broome, and this is Direction North.